Educational GMAT. Your partner in your GMAT journey.
This is very interesting. Very interesting. I'll give you guys a few minutes for this. Very interesting question. The graph shows data for physicians. So let's understand this graph first. So for example, in the year 2000, a total of around 85% physicians communicated using telephone, right? Only 18% used email, 1% used video conferencing, and so on. Now, if we look at telephone, right, while around 85% used telephone in the year 2000, out of, right, so basically within this 85, within this 85, 28% used telephone more than 4 times per month, right? Then this one is how much? 62, and this is 30. So almost 30% used telephone between 1 and 4 times a month, and so on, right? So the question is, it must be the case that the median number of times per month respondents reported having communicated with patients by dash in 2008 survey was lesser than in 2000 than that in the 2000 survey. Median for which of these was lesser in 2008 than in 2000? This is what the question is asking us. Median. Median is obviously, median is what? 50%, correct? See, this is 100%, right? Total 100. So very nice. So median number of times, how do we find this out? Median number of times per month. Median number of times per month. 50%. Median number of times per month respondents reported having communicated with patients by dash was lesser than that in the 2000 survey. Yes, friends. What's the answer? See, notice if you look at telephone, right? If you look at telephone, how do you find out the median in 2008 and median in 2000? Yes. How do you find out? For telephone. This is the 50% line, correct? How much is it in 2008? The yellow mark, right? The yellow thing, correct? Which is between 0 and 1. How much is it in 2000? Absolutely, right? It's in the black zone, which is between 1 and 4. So clearly for telephones, the median was lesser in 2008, right? In 2008, it is between 0 and 1, while in the year 2000, it is between 1 and 4. The median, which is the 50th percent mark. So these are the three options, by the way, right? So we've done this for telephones. Okay. Now let's look at email. Again, the 50th percent mark, right? What is the median for email in 2000? 0. What is the median for 2008? Again, 0. Same holds true for video conferencing also, right? It's 0 in both the years. So only for telephone is this median lesser in 2008 than in 2000. Are we clear? All right. Now let's look at this one. It must be, now this is very interesting. It must be the case that the percentage of respondents who reported having communicated with patients by both was as great or greater in 2008 as it was in the 2000 survey. So which of these combinations is greater in 2008 than in 2000? How do we find out? This is a tricky question, guys. This is a tricky question. Now, which was greater in, so percentage of respondents who reported having communicated with patients by both. Now, can you tell me, now this needs explaining. Can you tell me what percentage of respondents used email in 2008? 40%. What percentage used video conferencing in 2008? Video conferencing. 5, correct? So if we look at, now I'll just draw a diagram, all right? For 2008, email and video conferencing. So this is 40%, correct? 40%. And right? So this is email and video conferencing is 5%. So what's the minimum overlap possible between these two? What's the minimum overlap possible? 0%. Agreed? And what's the maximum overlap possible? 5%, right? 5 is the maximum, correct? So in other words, a maximum of 5% physicians in 2008, right? Maximum of 5% physicians used both email and video conferencing. Maximum of 5, correct? So this is the perspective that we are looking at. Now read this question again. It must be the case that the percentage of respondents who reported having communicated with patients by both was as great or greater in 2008 as it was in the 2000 survey. What do you think? For which of these combinations can we have a clear picture? Now, just so very nice. Now, let's actually just look at it again to give some perspective. Suppose we look at 2000 for telephone and video conferencing. Telephone is how many? 85, correct? And video conferencing is how many? 5, correct? Right? So what is the minimum overlap possible? 0, max 5, correct? Max is 5. All right. Now let us consider telephone and email. Telephone and email. Telephone and email. Telephone and email. Let's look at 2000, right? Telephone is how much? 2000. For 2000, for the year 2000, telephone is how much? 85. And email, uh, more than that, right? Almost 18, I would say. Correct? So tell me what is the, now this is important. What is the maximum overlap possible? 18 is the maximum, obviously, right? When this is 18 and this is 85. In other words, what does this mean? What does this mean? That every physician who was using email was also using telephone. Correct? That is when the maximum is 18. All right. How about the minimum? Now that's the thing. How about the minimum? Can you tell me what is the minimum? 85 plus 18 is how much? 103. So obviously there has to be at least a 3% overlap. Agreed? So it's like this. So minimum is 3 and maximum is 18 in 2000. Similarly, now let's look at 2008. 2008 telephone is how much? 80. And email is how much? Almost 38. No, 40. Almost 40, correct? Right? Email is 40. Now, again, can you tell me what's the minimum overlap here? Huh? Very nice. Notice 80 plus 40 is 120. So clearly the percentage cannot exceed 100. So the minimum overlap that is possible is 20, 60, and 20, right? This is telephone, this is email, correct? So the minimum overlap is 20 and maximum obviously would be 40. Maximum overlap would be like this, right? When this is 40, this is 80. So now if you look at telephone and email, right? If you look at telephone and email, even in the worst case scenario, right? What do you mean by worst case scenario? When the overlap is minimal, right? When the overlap is minimal, even in that case scenario, 2008 is greater than 2000. In fact, the worst case scenario of 2008 is greater than the best case scenario in 2000. So which means clearly for this particular combination, which is telephone and email, the percentage of respondents who communicated using telephone and email was greater in 2008 than in 2000. So telephone and email is the answer. Are we clear, guys? Are we clear? Again, I just want to make sure you understand. Let's just take for the year 2000. What is as per the bar diagram, right? Notice around 85% physicians use telephone and around, let's say, 4% use video conferencing. So these 4% could be here. Could be here as in 85% respondents use telephone, and from the remaining 15%, these 4% use video conferencing, right? If that's the case, then 0% physicians use telephone and video conferencing both. Are you getting me? Right? This is the worst case scenario. And what would be the best case scenario? The best case scenario would be when this 4% is somewhere among these physicians, right? These 4% physicians are among these 85% physicians who are already using telephone. In that case, anywhere between 0 to 4% use telephone and video conferencing both, right? So these are the various combinations that we have depicted using these various Venn diagrams. So telephone and email is a combination that is definitely more in 2008 than in 2000.